a venture capital fund largely focused on DePINs. I guess 100% focused on DePIN. So huge part of the thesis and a driving force in the space. Saul, before we sort of dive into all of the fun questions, I guess for those who are new or maybe learning about EV3 for the first time, can you share what DePIN actually means? Why is DePIN why is Bitcoin not a DePIN, right? And why it's such a powerful concept?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, like our view as a firm, or even before we had a firm towards crypto, has been that like what it really enables is solving coordination problems. And in Bitcoin, we had this, a very generalized and important problem, which is the Byzantine generals problem of how you can solve a coordination issue between non-coordinated actors. And that turned out to be really valuable for coming to consensus on a ledger. What we saw with DePIN was that there are many different types of coordination problems to be solved in the world that are not just ledger related, right? Like I'm looking outside, I'm in Midtown Manhattan right now, and there's like I see wireless radios on the roof, I see batteries, I see street cameras, I see street lights, I see sewers, like traffic signs, like all these things are tools by which humans need to coordinate with each other so that we can all live in the world and do the stuff we want to do. And it turns out that over the past like 20 years, the society as a whole has gotten really, really good at building technology. Like we've gotten extreme, like just Moore's law has made us better at building chips, better at building cameras, better at building wires, like all the sorts of components of these things. But we haven't really gotten much better at coordination. And so what that means is that actually like most of the cost, most of the friction, like the reasons why you're frustrated at your wireless provider, your energy provider, like all these guys, it's really just that they don't have the infrastructure to coordinate, and they have these like massive bloated bureaucratic organizations. And so what we saw with DePIN was the ability to allow people who don't know each other to coordinate to help fix the world around them. And it turns out that like the problems that you can solve in this way are actually like fucking huge when you look at it from a dollar amount and perspective amount. So not only is it really important from a like we all want to live in the world where people are empowered to like make a better world for your neighbors and for yourself, but also from an investment perspective, we think it's one of the most asymmetric opportunities that we've seen in our entire investment careers. And so that's why we chose to bet on it in such a big way and start EV3 with a core focus on backing DePIN. So yeah, as a whole, I think the high level for me is like coordinating with strangers to build stuff in the real world. Like that's what DePIN is.
Yeah.
And like we've obviously seen the space explode into like 10,000 different or I don't know, 1,000 different verticals over the past few years, whereas it was really just one or two. But I think we're still really early in sort of like exploring what is the right structures for DePINs, and also what are the different types of problems that we can go and apply them to.
Well, I want to break apart this coordination idea a little bit, because I think that's also a new concept to folks in conjunction with DePIN, right? And so I'm going to take an example of your energy company, right? And there's power lines all over the place. There's this massive grid, and there's an infrastructure that supports you being able to turn on your TV at night. And when the power goes out, you are 100% reliant on that entity to go and fix it. And I think what you're alluding to a bit with this coordination idea is your neighbor has a Tesla Powerwall, right? Can you create an infrastructure where they can sort of sell that energy to you, similar to the same way that you go and buy it from your energy company, and you have an uninterrupted service? Or to take that idea to Helium, right? You do the same thing with the internet. You're in a dead zone, somebody can, fill you in with their connectivity. Is that like the right angle that you would put on that?
Yeah, maybe the easiest way to explain is like the simplest, take the extreme case of the simplest possible example. Like say me and you were like, I don't know, we went hiking, we're in a cave somewhere, we have a single battery, and we're both trying to charge our phones. Like there's a fixed
Nice
number of electrons.
atomic example.
Yeah, there's a fixed number of electrons that can go through this battery at any given point in time. We both can't use it to power our phones at the same time, and so we somehow have to coordinate as like, hey, either you can charge it at one time, I can charge it another time, and we have to manage towards the overall capacity of this thing. And obviously for two people in a cave together, like that's easy, we just talk to each other. But now imagine scaling this up to tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, and that's basically a US electric grid. Like we cannot all use it at the same time. Same with wireless, right? Like there's a fixed capacity of this like central asset we all share, and we have to coordinate how to who can use it at what times in a way that's useful for everybody. And that's the real coordination issue that I think DePIN solves. And yeah, again, all bigger and more complex instantiations of this problem of basically like there's a battery between the two of us, we both want to use it, how do we effectively like mitigate over like the amount of time we have, how urgent we need it, how much money we have in order to like disperse those resources to the people who are using it.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad we broke that apart a little bit, because this is help set the framework as we dive a little bit deeper into the DePIN concepts and what we're doing with Helium and seeing in the space more broadly. On that topic, I am curious a little bit to understand your origin story here. So I want to know how you first came across Helium, and I guess what set the light bulb off for you, or who were you talking to at the time? What was the fundamental part that kicked off this whole thesis for you?
Yeah, maybe to zoom back a little bit. For me, it actually started before Helium. Like my path into crypto, back when I was a kid, there was this program called SETI at Home, where basically there was this like 2-acre, this fucking massive telescope. It's in Puerto Rico. It's a place called Arecibo, not too far from where I live.
RIP, right?
Yeah, yeah. And this telescope, I don't know. I think they built it in the 90s. And the idea was like, hey, we're going to collect extremely low frequency microwave signals from space, and we're going to look for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence. Basically, if we see some like series of prime numbers, like we think it's very unlikely that that's going to appear naturally in nature. And so it's a sign that somebody out there is trying to send us a signal. Now, the issue with this is that Arecibo is like in the middle of the fucking rainforest in Puerto Rico. You can't really easily build a data center out there to go and crunch, what is a massive amounts of data from outer space at all times. And so they had a really clever idea, which was, we're going to build a screensaver. This is, again, like the early 2000s or late 90s when it came out. And the screensaver, basically when your screen went dark, you would see a nice little animation, and it would use the spare cycles on your CPU to crunch these numbers and look for signs of prime numbers. And so I was obsessed with aliens as a kid. I would like go to garage sales and like buy old servers and like set them up. And I was, my parents hated it, but I was like mining these like SETI things back in the day.
Right. Getting no reward for it.
Yeah, no reward except for a couple of internet friends on the SETI forums who really liked talking to a 11-year-old or 12-year-old, I guess, back then about space. But that was that got me into Bitcoin. And so like I very early like understood these coordination problems that when you solve them in a distributed computing way can be really, really powerful. For DePIN specifically, I was working at a firm called Ribbit Capital, which was an investor. We were investors in Multicoin. I think Tushar sent us one of the first, 1,000 or 1,500 hotspots or something. And I didn't know the Multicoin team back then. Which is a box that showed up at our office, and my boss was like, hey, go figure out what the hell this is, go set it up. And immediately it just felt like I was like mining SETI at home again. I started getting paid hotspots. I started selling them to my friends. Within like 2 weeks, I'd say, I met I might have met you in the first 2 months. I met Max Gold was like hacking random radios. Like Connor Lovely was driving up and down the East Coast deploying radios everywhere. Nick Hawks was making these cool videos. The Hotspotty team were like building software platforms to help people. And so super quickly, like we just got enmeshed in this community of people who were all very willing at a time when like nobody else understood what DePIN was to just like go all in on this like weird new concept of how do we figure out as a community how to deploy a mass scale of wireless routers super quickly with this like novel incentive mechanism. And like I meant, like a lot of these people we're still friends with today now, almost 5 years later. So it was a good, but both the sides of the technology vision for me as sitting at an investment firm made sense for me to spend a lot of time on it. And then as I got to meet the people, it was clear to me that it was there was nothing else in crypto really that I had seen like it, except maybe a couple early Ethereum or like a few other communities that were extremely strong and different. And that was my indoctrination into Helium. And then at Ribbit we invested into Helium. We were involved in a bunch of the efforts that you guys had done around like grants committee, like stuff like that way back then. And we've now been have been lucky to have the chance to work with you guys across several different aspects over the past handful of years.
Cool. Yeah, the validator era and all of it, right? So, and the evolution, of course, we've seen from being a single network with IoT to now operating the two networks with IoT and mobile, both serving their distinct purposes, both sort of taking different angles on that coordination problem, getting sort of usable, robust infrastructure out there, which of course, I won't get into that yet, but I think it's important to talk about the utility and the partnerships that come out of that as well. But I did want to understand a little bit, in those early days, we talk about crypto, right? Like, how did you overcome that skepticism in either your firms and the folks you were talking to? Like, what were or other challenges, I guess, that you saw from the broader world as it relates to DePIN, as it relates to Helium?
Yeah, I'd say it goes in two directions, and like sequentially, what at least my experience was when I first found out about Helium, I was already super deep into crypto. It was DeFi summer, like all the people that I was hanging
Right.
out with investing in were crypto native. The firm that I was working at was very fintech and crypto focused, but we knew absolutely nothing about wireless. So I was uh, like relearning like basic physics as to like what a wavelength is, like all this stuff back then. It's like, all right, what does a radio actually do? Like, how does the signal get from one place to another? Like all these things we sort of learned from scratch. And as you learn like how the actual physics works, then you layer over like, okay, how do the industry economics work? What does it cost to transfer a byte of byte of bandwidth? Like, how do these things get priced in the market dynamically? Like all these questions are really, really relevant to how valuable the infrastructure is, and we knew nothing about it back then. So many of the questions I had at the beginning were actually about wireless. It was, we were the two main, we always ask this question of like, what would a smart person be concerned about before investing in a business? And a lot of the things that people were concerned about back then were two. One, this aspect that the bandwidth is sort of being rented from Charter by the end user, and it could be a terms of service violation. And so there was this, fear of like, hey, one day Charter is going to wake up or Comcast is going to wake up and say like, we're not making any economics off of Helium traffic. We're going to like blanket ban any of our users who are contributing their bandwidth to this or somehow punish them in some way. Turned out to never have happened. I think it's pretty unlikely that it happens at this point, but this is a really big concern that we had back in the day. And right. The second one was at the actual, Helium was focused on IoT exclusively back then. And there was this question of how big the market could be and what the prices were. IoT is very nascent. Even in 2020, like AT&T and Verizon both had LoRa style networks that they offered to their customers, but they were very low. They weren't really a focus. One, because they were small, but also they weren't really growing organically. And so, you sort of had a lot of like greenfield, like, oh man, IoT can be huge. Like we can imagine tens of hundreds of millions of devices, more than the amount of humans out there in the world. But when investors sort of like did the institutional diligence to dig in as to like, all right, how else are other people using these today? It turned out that like there wasn't super clear signs, at least within the telco products that were being built for IoT, that there was a lot of demand for this. I mean, a lot of the IoT customers were moving on to these like narrowband IoT, or basically like using cellular connectivity, trying to use the excess cell connectivity that they could instead of using like the native entirely purpose-built LoRa network. And so those are the two questions that were really prominent back then. I think as Helium then switched from IoT to mobile, the questions have shifted a lot more towards like just how entrenched the mobile industry is. And that's, I mean, I can't tell you how many like telco conferences Mahesh and I have been to where we try to pitch, just get laughed at because people are like, this will never work. Like, and that's been the same. It's been this more or less
Surprised.
the same for 4 years.
Yeah.
But the main questions they have is around, because mobile is a much more bandwidth hungry use case than IoT, the infrastructure has to be a lot more performant, and the ability of a decentralized network to build infrastructure that people need, not just to ping every 30 seconds to locate my luggage bag, but to like download videos is a whole, I think, a much higher layer of like performant infrastructure that you need. And so many of the questions that people have today are around, can the network actually deliver a useful experience? And it turns out that like it can. Over the, we've seen now there's 2 million people downloading traffic over the Helium network every day or every week, whether they're doing it directly through Helium Mobile or through a third-party roaming operator. And so I think that concern has been, massively de-risked, and I think it's like not that fair today, but it was most of what we heard in like 2022, 2023.
Yeah, that's 2 million daily users. I think that's our weekend peaks, right? Across a relatively small footprint. Generally speaking, across the number of radios that are deployed, we're somewhere north of 100,000. Somebody should look at the actual number on the Explorer. But a rapidly growing network, sort of in lockstep with a rapidly growing daily active user base, and of course the offload bandwidth that's available there. It's funny you mentioned,
like it's probably gonna get much better. Like this is US only today. I think it's the
right.
The level of upside that I think is there's just so much potential growth that can happen. You're right. The footprint is tiny in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, but I think that's the exciting thing, coming back to that discussion of what that coordination layer is and DePINs, right? That is how we got to the network that's out there today. Is I always love having a hotspot on me because it's just nice to be able to show it. But like, you can buy this little gateway and you can set it up in a good location, right? You can't go face a brick wall or something, but face it towards the folks that you're trying to serve. Make sure that you're keeping that utility in mind, and make sure that backhaul is good. That little box is doing all of the heavy lifting for you, and I know very well what all that heavy lifting is in the background. But you are now doing something that nobody else could do, right? Like, you have access to that venue. You are serving those customers who would otherwise not be served. I was at sushi last night and there was no bars in there. And my mother-in-law was trying to upgrade her phone through AT&T. Like, she wanted a new iPhone, couldn't do it. And it was one of those situations where it's like, yeah, if we get a single hotspot in here, this would completely change the narrative for all the customers that were in this place. And they would have access and they wouldn't even have to think about it. No second guesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I didn't really fully appreciate until spending more time on the ground with the Helium community is like how much value it brings to the venue, right? Like we just did an event in Africa a couple of weeks ago, and it was my first time in the continent, and just like the visceral reaction I had of like, I mean, I work a lot, right? And I was like, I'm trying to work everywhere and not having connectivity. I'd say like I probably dropped like 85% of my productivity over the 2 weeks that I was there, simply because of not having internet, everything else being exactly the same. And so when you come to these venues and you're like, man, people can now upgrade their phones, they can do work, they can communicate with their friends, they can do all these things. Like, the actual real estate of the venue actually becomes way much more profitable. It's not just that I make 50 cents a gig for having a radio there. It's actually that people are able to do like, they can now not only do economic activity within the people in the four walls, but they can do economic activity with people anywhere in the world online. And that just makes that space that much more valuable, which I think is something that I never really fully appreciated how much of a benefit some of these venues get from onboarding onto Helium. But now that the network is more mature, I've seen so many examples of it.
Yeah, I think Abai on the team has likened this to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like internet is actually a human need now. Like and I've actually talked with other folks about this, where even in like disaster situations, if people are not connected, they really, really struggle. And it's that ability to reach out to somebody, to talk to somebody, to scroll Instagram, to disconnect from the stressful situations around you, whatever it might be. It has become a human need for us, and particularly in our generation, right? Like, this is something that we have always had. So,
yeah, and imagine what the iPad kids are gonna like. The next generation is gonna be crazy. They're gonna have like a fucking aneurysm if you take away their internet. Like,
totally, yeah. Well, everything's there. So, like, and that's, I guess that's the important part, right? Like, we have this really big opportunity, and we're starting to see some really cool progress in connectivity layers. And I think I'll go a little bit off topic here, but direct to cellular is a really promising technology, and we're seeing AST Space Mobile and Starlink and all of these providers starting to be able to directly connect a handset with a satellite without, a big Starlink dish. And looking at Helium in that narrative, it's actually a perfect match, because what those providers can't do is get inside, right? Like, there is a metal roof over me. No Starlink's getting through that. I go down to the basement. You double down on that story. And so the opportunity for Wi-Fi conversion through Passpoint and like Helium Plus, or setting up these hotspots, is the thing that unlocks that universal connectivity between all these providers. And it's been really interesting in the last couple of months. I'm sure you followed this, but EchoStar selling off their spectrum. And so now you have Starlink and all these others starting to pick up those resources from EchoStar or Dish.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a super interesting space. We used to get this question a lot as to, I think one of, not a smart criticism, but probably a dumb criticism of DY back then was like, well, won't Starlink just like take over everything,
right,
and sort of like serve everything? And I'm like, for me, that was why it was really important to understand even a tiny bit of the of the physics behind it. It's like if you want to send data from one plate from me to you in the world, it's almost never the best way to send it up 10,000 meters into the sky across like a
Right.
very tumultuous atmosphere and then back the other way and have it take several seconds. It almost always the right way to do it is to do it terrestrially if you can. And obviously there are these edge cases where you can't do that, and direct to satellite is really powerful. But I agree, it's totally an unlock. It just provides more coverage, backhaul in places. And the thing that DY enables is really this coordination problem, which is a micro scale. How do we get hotspots in the exact right locations in people's homes, in malls, and airports, and everything else? And it's just there should be connectivity everywhere, and have it be omnipresent. And so these are just two different, I think, achieve two very different goals and two different economic sort of like paradigms for how to get people internet.
I think it's actually an important thing to break apart here, and we're going real deep on the telco narrative here, but effectively when your phone is connecting to something, it's not just like AT&T pays for this tower and they own the tower, which I think is the model that's in a lot of folks' head when they think about their phone connecting, right? I'm in a Verizon dead zone, I'm not going to have Verizon. But the reality is, over the last decades, it's very much more of a marketplace. And so you've got your crown castles and your REITs and all these other folks that are going and deploying this infrastructure, and your phone is effectively placing a bid for connectivity every time it's connecting somewhere. And it's the carrier's responsibility to try and balance those bids so that your subscription is profitable, right? And so if you think about the dichotomy between satellite and terrestrial, almost, I guess, probably 100% of the time, that terrestrial connection should be more cost effective, right? You didn't have to send a $250,000 satellite into space that has the lifespan of a couple of years, right? And you can do effectively the exact same thing that satellite is meant to do with a $250 box. So I guess I can't emphasize enough the importance of the combination of all of those things in order to create that strong user experience that, again, nobody should have to think about, but is very cool. Anyway, I'm going to pull us off the deep dive because I'm starting to nerd snipe myself there. Let's look at the bigger DePIN picture. So let's pull it out of Helium a little bit. EV3 is 100% focused on DePIN, right? I guess, why do you think it is becoming or has become the most exciting area in crypto? Like, we're seeing Zcash is a narrative right now, but you've seen meme coins, we've seen heavy emphasis on Bitcoin. There's all sorts of stuff in DeFi. Like, what pulls DePIN out as the top of that stack for you?
Yeah. This has changed over time. We've learned a lot over the past 3 years, as I think the whole space has, as we've launched several products. People have pivoted, and the market structure has changed. We are, how do I put it? I think we at EV3, for the folks who have been around DePIN for a while, I think we actually made a mistake early on, which is that we sort of like overburdened or overloaded the DePIN term with too much. And for us at EV3, our focus is solving real-world coordination problems with crypto. I think DePIN is a very, very big category of that. That specifically is building physical infrastructure networks, and then there are other networks that are software-based tools that are also trying to solve similar flavors of problems. And I think one of the fairest criticisms of DePIN as a narrative or meta over the past 3 years has been that probably it got overloaded. In Q1 2024, you could raise a DePIN for toenail clippers and raise a seed. It was insane, right? And it turns out that what we've learned about DePIN is that actually it's very, very, very difficult to solve. You're solving technical infrastructure problems. You're solving these crypto economic incentive problems. You're trying to break into stodgy industries, and the reality is that getting it right on the first try is extremely difficult. I don't think we've seen one DePIN network who on their first product has gotten to product market fit and scaled revenues and everything. It almost always takes a pivot or two or three. And so in places where I think DePIN is still extremely powerful are the biggest markets. I think that's energy, it's compute, it's wireless, and then maybe it's mapping or visual or sensor data. But how we think about it internally is quite frankly mapping onto the human mind or onto the human body. It's we have tens of thousands of years of human evolution or hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution that have happened, and how does your body operate? Well, from a resource allocation perspective, like your brain is using 20% of your energy at any given time for processing. Your cardiovascular system is using a certain amount of and your digestive systems like get energy in and sort of like you power the rest of your body. Your eyes are using a super outsized portion of your energy to sort of like understand the world around you because visual data is so powerful. And we think society kind of runs the same way. Like the ability to hear and talk and communicate is a super, super powerful thing. The ability to like eat food and consume resources and power the rest of your body is a very central system. The ability to see and understand the world around you is a very central system. And DePIN provides all of these at a societal level. And those are, for better or worse, that's the best mental model we found to try to focus on what's the most important sort of like pieces of infrastructure for society. And because DePIN is so hard, I think you really have to focus on these moonshots. Like, every helium and wireless, daylight or glow and energy, like there is no path that's existing to build a DePIN network. Like these projects are building their own path by definition. And so we think in order to make that worth it, you really have to focus on the biggest ideas and the most important markets. And that's things that are, low on the Maslow's hierarchy or high on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like we mentioned. And those things tend to reflect, both sides, like really big dollar values in terms of the global industries, and also a very high percentage of like your calories spent if you look at the equivalent from a human body perspective. And so that's how we've narrowed down into what we feel are like the most important areas of DePIN and why we think that, a single wireless network or energy network, we're like, these are $100 billion, $1 trillion opportunities if you can become the substrate for these industries. And so that's primarily where we focus as investors. Obviously, we think there are a lot of cool DePIN networks that are not necessarily great investments. And those are okay too. And the beauty of DePIN is you can have a community come together and build that kind of stuff. And if you want to build the DePIN for electronically monitored toenail clippers, like that's great, and you can do that. But obviously for us as VCs, like we're trying to focus on our business is the most asymmetric outcomes, and so we try to focus on the biggest opportunities.
Well, so speaking a little bit around the opportunity, or more so the utility, today Helium is seeing some real demand. We see data traffic moving through AT&T and T-Mobile and Google Fi and Helium Mobile. So these folks are earning H&T for their connectivity, right? I guess, how do you look at that as an investor?
I'd say the main shift is that infrastructure has to, you're spending a shit ton up front to then recover it back over 10, 20 years. And maybe if we build really cheap infrastructure, we can do it pay back in like 5 or 7 years, but that's the nature of infrastructure investments. And Helium at the beginning, like, people were earning basically just inflationary rewards. Like, people were ordering a hotspot, their manufacturer would send it to them in 2020. I mean, like 6 months late, and they would plug it in and get paid like $30 a day in inflationary rewards of HNT or something like that. Right. The thing that excites us most about Helium today, which I think is really, really unique compared to any other DePIN project, is that the best locations no longer need incentives. Like, I think Helium is now past this, like, we need inflation or inflationary incentives to sort of like get the best deployments on board. Today, if you have a really high quality location, you're making even more money than you were in 2020 off the inflation, frankly, just off the data rewards, right? Like, we see some of these hotspots in airports. Like, I was doing some math. There's like a few dozen or like top 50 hotspots are doing like 1,000% IRRs effectively on just the data traffic that they see relative to a $250 hotspot. And so this is like when the flywheel, you're sort of like always waiting for the flywheel to kick in as a network of these, like, as an investor in these two-sided networks. And that's a metric we track really closely because I think Helium today is now past that point. It's like we from a capital efficiency perspective, Helium might have given up 40, 50, whatever, some 30% of its market cap over the first 5 years of its life as a network in order to bootstrap to where it is today. I think over the next 10 years, the Helium network is going to grow, 10 times more and use up 10% less dilution. So it's going to be 100 times more efficient in terms of like building out wireless coverage, because we now have sort of like reached this point of minimum viable density, whereby if you're a deployer, it just makes sense on a pure dollars and cents basis to go out and do the work to get a really high quality location. So I think that's something that's really unique. And again, this is another thing that was sort of an open question about DePIN for a long time. And now we finally have the evidence to go and say, like, no, this isn't just inflationary rewards and us trading around magic internet money. This is, this makes extremely logical sense from any investor in the world would be excited about 1,000% IRRs on a product that people use more and more every year for the past 20 years and is deeply ingrained in every facet of our lives. And so that's why we continue to have so much conviction after so many years on the DePIN story as a whole.
Yeah, it used to be the narrative that proof of coverage was going to drive to zero over some 15-year time span, and now we're hitting that today. So it's been really exciting to see that ramp up on utility. All right, let me close this out a little bit. So last question for you, for the folks who might be tuning in, hearing about Helium or DePIN for the first time, what is the one takeaway that you want them like locked in their head?
For me, it all comes down to the fact that you actually are empowered, that people are empowered to improve the world around them. Like that is the core crux of DePIN and everything else, is that I think there's just this like malaise in the world today of people like, you complain, so you go to the DMV, it takes forever. There's like, all the deodorants locked up at CVS, like the traffic lights don't work, my power goes out in Puerto Rico, like whatever it may be. It's easy to complain. And for a long time, that was the right complaint, because there was actually no way to go and fix the stuff in your life because they had been blocked off. That's no longer true today. Like if you see a problem, you can like just go do things and go and fix it. And a lot of times that's enabled through these networks like Helium, networks like Daylight and Energy, whatever it may be. But the key takeaway is that like, hey, internet is this one very, very big and important problem that Helium has taken this approach for, which is basically like just fucking do things and fix the world around you, make it better for yourself, make it better for other people. And that's at the end of the day, like at the center of why DePIN is so important and powerful, and why we think it's gonna last for decades, centuries.
Cool. I love it. Saul, thank you so much for your time coming on today. Where should folks follow you, or EV3? What's your number one platform right now, or what are the handles?
Our website's ev3.xyz. My Twitter handle is danconia _crypto. Danconia, like the
amazing.
Alice
We got it up on the screen for you too.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Saul, thank you so much, and follow EV3, and go deploy some hotspots or learn about DePIN.
Yeah, or sell your parents some Helium phones, Helium plans.
There you go. Yeah, Helium Mobile. It's a solid service. So.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Take it easy. We'll talk soon.